Your Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, dignitaries, participants from the region, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning. I'm very happy to see many of the known faces and also the new faces in this room. On behalf of the organizer, it's my pleasure and privilege to welcome you and introduce the speakers of the opening plenary of the Adaptation Forum 2010. From my left, we have Madam Laila Lee, Director, Asia Center, Stockholm Environment Institute. Then we have Dr. Anders Grunland, Director, SENSA. We have Madam Ursula Schäfer-Prus, Vice President, Knowledge Management and Sustainable Development, Asian Development Bank. Then we have His Excellencies, Minister for Science and Technology, Thailand, Mr. Virachai Virametukul. And I would also like to inform you that in the program, His Excellencies Suit Kunkit couldn't attend due to unavoidable circumstances, but we are happy to have the Minister for Science and Technology of Thailand with us. Then we have His Excellencies Minister for Nature, Resources and Environment, Samoa, Mr. Phau Muina Tiatia Liuga. I'm sorry, sir, if I mispronounce your name. Then we have His Excellencies Ambassador on the Climate Change Sweden, Mr. Stefan Thalander. And then we have Dr. Hyodoki Mori, President IGS Japan. And then at the very end, we have the Dr. Yong-O Park, Regional Director and Representative for the Asia and the Pacific of UNEP. In the room, we have about 500 pupils, and we have the registered 600 pupils. I'm sure many of them will come and join us during the parallel session. With that, ladies and gentlemen, it's my immense pleasure to invite Dr. Yong-O Park, Regional Director, Representative of Asia and the Pacific of the United Nations Environment Programme, to formally welcome the participants and deliver his welcome speech.
Thank you, Babu. Good morning. His Excellency, Minister of Science and Technology, Mr. Virachai Virametukul, and His Excellency, Minister of Natural Resources and Environment of Samoa, Mr. Tiatia Lenuga, and His Excellency, Mr. Stefan Tillander, the Climate Change Ambassador of Sweden, and Mr. Morisang, President of IGS, and Mrs. Ursula Schäfer, Vice President of ADB, and Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great honor that I welcome you to the first Asia-Pacific Climate Change Adaptation Forum 2010, mainstreaming adaptation into development planning. I draw your attention to the importance of this forum, which represents the first large conference exclusively dealing with climate change adaptation in our large region, Asia and the Pacific. Through this first adaptation forum, we hope we will be able to bring the voice of the region to the next climate change deliberation in Cancun and to other relevant international debates. I'm not welcoming you only on behalf of the United Nations Environmental Programme, but also on behalf of our partners and donors, to whom I also express my deep gratitude, to whom, without their support, this large gathering is not possible. the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, SIDA, and the Swedish Environment Secretariat in Asia, SENSA, through which this forum and the overall initiative originated. The Asian Development Bank, ADB, the Government of Japan and the Government of Thailand, and the Stockholm Environment Institute, SEI, the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, the Institute of Global Environmental Strategies, IGS, the Asian Institute of Technology, UNEP Regional Resource Center for Asia and the Pacific, the Asia Pacific Adaptation Network, and Adaptation Knowledge Platform. We can state with confidence that climate change is the defining challenge of our times for all countries in the world, and particularly for developing countries in Asia and the Pacific. Countries in the world are working together to react to this defy, applying important mitigation measures and at the same time emphasizing the importance of adapting to the new conditions, stresses, increased variability, and natural hazards. In the recent UN Climate Change Conference in Tianjin, parties under UNFCCC specifically discussed on how to strengthen the capacity of countries and institutions to better adapt. Parties also requested regional and national networks and centers to generate, share, and manage information and knowledge. I'm glad that UNEP, together with the above-mentioned partners, is already working to fulfill this request, also through the Asia-Pacific Adaptation Network and the Adaptation Knowledge Platform. 2/3 of the world's poor are living in Asia-Pacific with less than $1 a day. Many of these people live in very vulnerable conditions, such as coastal area covering 140,000 kilometers of the Great Indian Ocean region only. The IPCC first assessment report projected that 75% of the population who lives along Asian megadeltas will be vulnerable to sea level rise. The countries of this region attempt to reach sustainable development as well as to adapt to the adverse impacts of climate change. But challenges remain on converging these two issues. Under these conditions, economic, social, and ecological challenges have been worsened by climate uncertainty. The dignitaries from governments and international organizations who are honoring us with their presence at this opening ceremony will certainly reconfirm the utmost importance of adaptation in this region. The high-level representation this adaptation forum received and the presence of all of you this morning reflect the gravity of this issue and the attention we all should pay to support countries integrate adaptation measures to reduce the impacts of climate change. The idea of adaptation from 2010 was generated by the recognized need of a regional platform, a space to enhance knowledge sharing among countries, experts, scientists, and so on. The adaptation from 2010 is not ad hoc and isolated, but it is the first of a series of annual events that will strengthen our collaboration at regional level, that will enhance the transfer of knowledge to countries in Asia and the Pacific, and that attempts to open the doors to different stakeholders. In this framework, let me also inform you that the results of your discussions, contributions, and reflections will be brought to the forthcoming 4th Asian Ministerial Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction next week in Incheon, Korea. Around 500 distinguished participants are here today, from government to academia, experts on climate change adaptation at national and international level, development partners, civil society, and private sector. I hope we will make best use of this opportunity to take stock of where we are, Are we, governments, organizations, and civil societies, academia, private sector, really being effective in mainstreaming adaptation into planning? If not, what should we change? Is the science we have appropriate? Does it reach the stakeholder who needs it? Is the private sector playing enough of a role in adaptation? Are we reaching the audience of the non-converted, or are we always talking amongst the usual suspects? This is not uniform. You, participants and stakeholders present here today, own this forum. We organized it in partnership with up to the now mentioned organizations and keeping the needs of region in mind, because together we can make a transformative, sustainable differences for the most vulnerable people in this region and around the world. I encourage all of us to challenge ourselves in the plenary, in the parallel sessions, in the focus events, and any other occasions we might have over the course of these 2 days. Before I closing, I apologize for the inconvenience you experienced this morning entering this building. And we choose this building because it is the most appropriate building to have this kind of gatherings in Bangkok. In closing, once again, I welcome you all to Bangkok, and I have the pleasure in declaring the Adaptation Forum 2010 open. Let's act and make differences together. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Park, for your valuable remarks and the importance of this Adaptation Forum 2010. The continued support of our Executive Director encouraged us actually to take the challenge and organize this Adaptation Forum here in Bangkok for the Asian Pacific. He is not with us, but his video message is with us. And let us hear from Akim.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, let me begin by thanking the Kingdom of Thailand for once again hosting this meeting that has already built on the previous meeting in 2009 when the Prime Minister of Thailand and my dear colleague, the Minister of Environment and Natural Resources, hosted the first meeting of the Adaptation Network. Let me also thank you by giving me an opportunity through the means of this video recording to share just a few thoughts as to how important and how critical this meeting is to further developing our global adaptation agenda. We are just a few weeks away from the next meeting of the UNFCCC in Cancun, and as we all know, international climate change negotiations are not exactly proceeding at the pace that we had hoped just a year or two ago. Adaptation is a concept that from the very early stages of the international community beginning to address the challenge of climate change lived in a semi-ambivalent state of definition and also political priority. To some, focusing on mitigation was the priority and adaptation would have been a distraction. To some, the concept of adaptation is even a sign of helplessness and resignation. Well, the simple fact is our climate change efforts internationally are not yet proceeding at the pace and on a scale that is commensurate with the challenge. Therefore, adaptation as a means of responding to the inevitability of global warming, its consequences on the ground and to people, communities and economies has become more important. But the adaptation agenda is not just one of a resigned response to the inevitability of climate change. It is also an effort to try and understand, first of all, the actions that we have to take against the backdrop of what we now know is likely to face us all, whether in the north and the south, whether in small island developing states or in the larger emerging economies. Adapting to climate change is, on the one hand, yes, dealing with a certain set of phenomena that we now have to take as a given reality. But, and this is also really the core of your meeting this year, mainstreaming adaptation into development planning,